IBESS, Climate Change and Energy Production Part 4, will focus on the factors that affect the choice of energy adopted by different societies. The significant ideas are there is a range of different energy sources available to societies that vary in their sustainability, availability, cost, and socio-political implications. The choice of energy sources is controversial and complex. Energy security is an important factor in making energy choices. Here is the outline of all the available movies in the Climate Change and Energy Production Unit. Use this outline to find the movie you need for review. This movie is focused here. Here are the IB syllabus statements that drive the entirety of this movie. Discuss the factors that affect the choice of energy sources adopted by different societies. There's a range of different energy sources available to societies that vary in their sustainability, availability, cost, and socio-political implications. Evaluate the energy strategy of a given society. Here are the factors that influence choice, strategy, and security around energy. We will start with availability. Hydropower requires river water and a dam. The dam that provides the most hydropower on an annual basis is the Itaipu Dam on the border of Brazil and Paraguay. Brazil and Paraguay are tropical countries, thus enjoying abundant water supplies. Hydropower is a natural choice of energy for Brazil and Paraguay. Availability would influence choice, as it would be strategic to use available energy sources. Increasing the use of available resources would be a strategy to increase energy independence. Energy security depends on adequate, reliable, and affordable supplies of energy that provide a degree of energy independence. Now, Canada has a lot of water, given its latitude. Canada's hydropower represents 26% of its total energy supply, and only China produces more hydropower. Maximizing the use of an available energy resource is strategic because it provides energy independence. China is the world's largest producer of hydropower. China has numerous rivers, thus availability would influence China's choice of energy. It would be in China's strategic interest to use available energy resources. Increasing the use of available resources would be a strategy to increase energy independence. This table shows the amount of hydropower used by various countries in million tons of oil equivalents. You can see that China, Brazil, and Canada are the three largest consumers of hydropower energy. Availability of water has influenced the energy choices made by these countries. The availability of oil has provided energy independence for the countries with the good fortune to have oil beneath their soil. The Middle Eastern countries with oil have been strategic in using oil to gain energy independence and wield political power. However, the inequitable availability and uneven distribution of oil may lead to conflict. This diagram distorts the size of countries based on their known oil reserves. In terms of oil, you can see the importance of the Middle East and Venezuela with their large reserves of oil. Availability influences choice, and countries with available oil have strategically used oil to gain energy independence and wealth, if not political power. Notice that in Southeast Asia, oil reserves are quite small. Low oil reserves influences energy choice and influences the politics between societies. An inequitable availability and an uneven distribution of energy may lead to conflict. Desert regions might place higher value on solar voltaic electricity than regions with greater cloud cover. Available solar energy should influence choice. Countries with high levels of solar energy would be strategic to increase their use of solar energy as a means to provide energy independence. Energy choices adopted by a society may be influenced by availability, and this in turn affects energy security and independence. Countries with wind can choose wind energy. Energy choices adopted by a society may be influenced by availability, and this in turn affects energy security and independence. Societies located along coastal areas experience high winds and can choose to increase the energy provided by wind, a renewable energy form. Countries with high levels of wind would be strategic to increase their use of wind energy as a means to provide energy independence. Here are the top 10 countries exploiting wind power. All of them, except Austria, have coastline along which the wind blows well. Energy choices adopted by a society may be influenced by availability, and this in turn affects energy security and independence. Now let's look at the technological factors that influence energy choice and strategy. Nuclear energy is available to societies with the technical know-how and the politics of peace. Countries that are politically unstable do not have access to uranium. Nuclear energy also presents the risk of a nuclear accident. As a result, societies have been cautious in adopting nuclear energy. Countries with high levels of nuclear tolerance would be strategic to increase their use of nuclear energy as a means to provide energy independence. Nuclear power is not available to all countries in the world, and this is due to politics. But if, as a country, you have access to uranium, and you have the technology and the politics of peace, nuclear power might be a good choice, a strategic choice, one that could provide energy independence, energy security. World uranium supplies are shown in this world map. Australia has large quantities of uranium from which nuclear power is generated, but Australia has chosen to be nuclear-free despite available supplies of uranium. To choose nuclear power involves having the technology, the politics of peace, a stable government, and a society willing to accept the risk of an accident, in balance with the benefits that nuclear power brings, including an increased amount of energy independence. France produces 75% of its electrical energy needs using nuclear power. Not all societies have the same high tolerance for nuclear energy as France. Nuclear accidents, such as Chernobyl in 1986 and Fukushima in 2011, have dissuaded societies from adopting nuclear power. But France has been strategic in its use of nuclear power to gain energy independence. Here are the top 10 countries exploiting nuclear energy. All of these countries are more economically developed countries with the technology to choose nuclear energy. If a society has the appropriate technology and is located in a region with high solar energy, choosing concentrated solar power, CSP, would be a strategy to increase energy independence. Technology influences choice of energy. Now let's look at some cultural factors that influence the choice of energy by societies. Does your culture choose oil because it serves a lifestyle of driving large cars? Cultural values influence energy choice. Is a gas-guzzling car strategic? Oil is a cheap, available, and versatile resource that has shaped cultural values, such as the big gas-guzzling car. But oil is non-renewable, and the combustion of oil increases carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Cultural values influence energy choice and ultimately energy independence. Societies would be strategic to choose sources of energy that provide greater independence, greater security. Changes in cultural values could increase energy conservation and thus increase energy independence and security. Culturally, France has a high tolerance for nuclear energy despite the risks of a nuclear accident or the difficulties in storing the radioactive spent fuel rods, the nuclear waste. Now let's look at some political factors that influence choice of energy by societies. Energy security involves a dependence on international relationships. The dependence of one country on another for oil influences the political relationship among the countries. And if serious disagreements arise, the oil supply is at risk. Governments provide subsidies to certain energy sources and less so to other sources. The U.S. government has subsidized oil and gas, making oil inexpensive. And when an energy source is cheap, societies choose it over the other forms of energy. Given climate change, the time for governments to subsidize renewable forms of energy has come. Despite a changing climate due to fossil fuel combustion, Trump works to gain the support of voters. This is politics. Politicians can be influenced by big money, particularly the oil industry. Thus, rather than making rational decisions based on climate change data, politicians play politics with energy. Political lobbying and campaigns influence public choice. This graph was created by a conservative think tank closely aligned with oil companies to promote coal by advertising that wind and solar would be expensive. This advertisement comes despite the fact that coal is the most polluting of our fossil fuels. Now let's look at economic factors that influence the choice of energy by societies. When an energy source is inexpensive, societies choose it. It's difficult to convince societies that a renewable form of energy is better when it's more expensive. This slide provides data on how many jobs exist in various renewable energy sectors. We could be choosing renewable energy on the prospect of creating more jobs. And don't forget the impact of government subsidies for the oil and gas industry that make fossil fuels cheap. If the price is right, societies will choose it. A society may wish to choose one form of energy over another, but because of rapid population growth, have no choice other than to go with what's available and what's cheap. India might be a good example here. India needs whatever energy it can get. India is exploiting many energy sources no matter what the environmental cost. Coal, hydro, even nuclear energy are all on the rise in India as the country of 1.3 billion people is growing at a rate above world average. Is this economics or sociopolitics or both? Now let's look at the environmental factors that influence the choice of energy by societies. I will move quickly through this important section. Take notes as you go. A nuclear accident is an environmental concern that influences societal choice of nuclear energy. The environmental damage, the ecological damage to the river valley when building a dam for hydropower is an environmental concern that influences societal choice of hydropower energy. Here is the Three Gorges Dam Reservoir in China from satellite in the upper right and on a map in the lower part of the slide. The reservoir is 660 kilometers long, and it flooded a total area of 632 square kilometers of land, displacing more than 1 million people. This graph displays carbon emissions by energy sector. This graph says it all about the environmental impact of fossil fuel combustion. Consider climate change. All societies need to be choosing renewable forms of energy in order to reduce the environmental degradation that has come from carbon dioxide emissions. Air pollution, such as smog or acidic deposition, is an environmental concern that should reduce societal choice of fossil fuel energy and increase societal choice of renewable energy forms. And lastly, let's look at sustainability as a factor in energy choice by societies. Fossil fuels, while currently available, cheap and versatile, are non-renewable. Fossil fuels in the long term are unsustainable. Wind energy is renewable and sustainable. However, for wind farms on land, there are some environmental concerns. Birds, are they unsightly? Noise? Denmark, Spain, and Portugal, and Germany are societies that have chosen wind energy for its sustainable quality. Wave or tidal energy is renewable sustainable. The UK, Australia, Portugal, and the US are societies that have chosen tidal and wave energy for its sustainable quality. Hydroelectric energy is renewable and sustainable as part of the water cycle. But are there environmental issues with the building of dams? You should be able to answer that question. Biomass energy, also known as biofuels, includes wood, dung, and ethanol from fermented crops. Biofuels are sustainable as they originate from plants, a renewable resource. Biomass energy, in use in the image in this slide, is used mostly in less economically developed countries. Biofuels are sustainable because they originate from plants, a renewable resource. But what about the deforestation to make sugarcane fields? Are we using land that could grow food to make fuels for cars? Are those of us wealthy enough to own cars, thus demand fuel, changing land use? Could land used to grow food be converted to land used to make biofuels? Is this ethically right? And what about the deforestation? How sustainable are biofuels? So why would a society choose one form of energy over another? Remember, the world remains dependent on fossil fuels, but as the world confronts environmental issues such as climate change and air pollution, societies are choosing alternative forms of energy. As well, countries are always looking for energy independence, energy security. This slide and the next provide some examples of what countries are doing with respect to energy choice. Spend some time reviewing this slide. Currently, the world remains dependent on fossil fuels, but as the world confronts environmental issues such as climate change and air pollution, societies are choosing alternative forms of energy. As well, countries are always looking for energy independence and energy security. This slide provides some examples of what countries are doing with respect to energy choice. Spend some time reviewing this slide. And that brings us to the end of IB ESS Climate Change and Energy Production, Part 4.